Hi, I'm Sammy Younan.
I'm Alex Ross.
And we're on Creatortown this week.
I don't think we did that right.
I don't know.
Okay.
I know, let's try that again.
I'm just gonna, it's Taco Tuesday. I'm going to wrap it
Yeah,
up.
Did you bring up the first date thing because Backstreet Boys are blaring in the
Yes.
background?
Yeah, well, that's it too. Yeah.
Can we afford this song in this
Yeah, I don't think
podcast?
so.
I don't think so.
The CanCon, everybody needs to put 5 cents into the tray before you leave here so we can
Yes.
send Universal.
5 cents for each Backstreet
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the royalty payment. That's it.
Bonjour, Internet. Welcome to our weekly celebration of creator collaboration, coming to you from downtown Creatortown on Girth Radio. I'm your host, Dan Speerin, from your neighborhood creator organization, the Independent Web Creators of Canada. And with me is YouTuber, filmmaker, and OG DOP, Vince Kesavamoorthy. What's going on?
OGDOP.
That's you, man. The last time you actually were a DOP has been a while. Do we count that in YouTube land?
I don't know.
Our
anymore.
Google short
Yeah.
film?
Yeah, maybe.
That's like in a vault somewhere with Walt Disney?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I guess we could count it. Yeah.
You're sporting the Leafs colors this week, so
Yes. Well,
so
they did win, so hey.
You went to the last game of the regular season, right?
Yeah, the Columbus Blue Jackets versus the Leafs game. Yeah, it's just sad that they didn't get the point, but they are winning now. So hey.
I'm a Red Wings fan, so my season ended for the first time really, really early, like in my entire life almost.
Well, thanks for Babcock.
Yeah, you're welcome. I also just got out of an IWCC meeting, so we just got a huge thing, which is WebFest is coming up in May. So our executive producers, Courtney and Nick, showed us what's going on for that. I can't tell you too much yet, but I can drop a lot of knowledge on you next week. But for now, I will say this. We're going to have an awards party, 114 stories up in the air, so that's going to be fun. I'm going to enjoy that. We've got an international showcase at the CN Tower. It's a ton of web series. We talked about this last week, too. So I'm pretty excited about it. But keep checking TO Webfest on Twitter and Facebook. We're announcing things all the time. So just set your Facebook and your social to hashtag TO Webfest, and you'll find out a whole bunch of new stuff. But we have somebody who's actually going to be in the fest, and both of these gentlemen today on the show are going to be there. So Vince, let's go to the bar. Let's grab our guests, because this is a very special Creator Town. This week is unique here in Creatortown because it's not just a show, it's the Creatortown Summit of sorts. We have not one, but 2 heads of podcast networks that make DigiCanCon awesome. Sammy Younan, who runs the very place we make this show in every week, Girth Radio, well, he and his friend Alex had a dream to create a podcast studio in a bar that would put out a virtual bat signal for artists. Luckily, Alex owned a bar, so that worked out well. And a podcast network was born right here at the Pacific Junction Hotel. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Alex Ross also had a dream. After over a decade of working for major broadcasters in Canada, he decided to do what they weren't, and followed his dream to bring a voice to all amazing creators who weren't getting enough love in this city or this country. His style of non-stop hustle with a sprinkle of Neil Young shout-out gave birth to Ross Never Sleeps, a podcast that he hosts himself. But more importantly to us, maybe, and to him, is where you can find that show, on Never Sleeps Network, where 5 amazing podcasts bring listeners new and unique perspectives. This episode, we bring their brains together for one Creatortown cram session, how to win at life and podcasting. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Grab the drinks here. We've got another non-drinker, so this is Alex and Sammy. Hello, Joe. How are we doing?
Good.
We're doing good.
I got a Mai
Well.
Tai.
You got a Mai Tai?
I'm Mai Tai,
And then we
yeah.
got 2 iced teas and a water because we're clearly partying after the show.
All right.
I mean, I'm partying with water. You don't have to party with alcoholic beverages, is all I'm saying.
That's okay.
That's true.
We're going to be the Kim Mitchell podcast. You might as well go for a soda gang.
That's my kind of party.
That's good. It's good. Alex, I wanted to start with you just because this is Sammy's home turf, so the away game for you. Congratulations on 2 of your shows getting into WebFest. So we're
Thank
thrilled
you.
about that. We love the shows. The jury loved your shows. You have your own show,
I do.
Ross Never Sleeps, and Speech Bubble that made it into the fest. So let's start off with those 2 series, but let's also talk about, give me your origin story. How did this whole thing come to be?
So, Never Sleeps Network started when all of my friends eventually got washed out from or burnt out from all the major broadcasters just working them to their bones, contract to contract, no benefits, 2 jobs usually to make up for a full-time amount of work per week. It just seemed like the system was really off in Toronto and Canada. Big corporations, hire a lot of interns. They hire a lot of staffers, and if you're not really in the spotlighting show, you're kind of left to scramble for your next gig. And I was tired of scrambling all the time, and when I finally got something, it was like my life finally, was encapsulated with a job that was either a 16-hour day on set, mind fuck that you would eventually not be able to do anything after it, whether it's go to the gym or cook yourself a nice meal. And at the end of the day, you didn't even own any of the content. You worked your butt off. True. You put your blood and sweat into it. And as much as you love seeing that credit, all it did was help you get another contract to scramble for after. And I'm not saying that I'm that bad at doing any of these jobs, that I was always looking for something, but I think naturally as a freelancer, as somebody who's always striving to better themselves, whether it's a better role, a better project, you're always kind of keeping your head above ground, looking for that next opportunity. I'm an opportunist. So the opportunity finally arose in my own head through lots of therapy, that it was time to start benefiting the most important person that was putting in all this work, and that was me. But as much as it starts with me, it doesn't end with me, because my project was to involve all the friends of mine, all the networks that I've been making, and putting them under one roof and saying, okay, what can we do here? What can we make? What can we own? What can we create? And then sell, get sponsorships for. Why are we doing this for so many other people when together we are just as good of a team, if not better, and we can finally do what we want to do?
So give me the elevator pitch if we're standing in the street and you've never met me. What is Never Sleeps Network? Never
Sleeps Network is Toronto's premier independent podcast network. We're not a comedy network. We're not a lifestyle network. We're a mishmash of Toronto-based talent that is searching to better other Toronto-based talent. Now, that can be a Canadian scale, it can be a worldly scale, but Toronto's the mecca for a lot of specialties, a lot of subcultures, and a lot of experts. And Never Sleeps Network is an agency mining the city for the talent to make a podcast, to make a YouTube series, and keep it kind of lo-fi. You mentioned my Never Sleeps Network roots come from a little bit of a Neil Young approach. It's about kind of throwing as much good content to us to the wall and seeing what sticks to the proverbial city.
Sammy.
Yes, sir.
Sitting beside Alex here, we're going to try to mash your brains together. And because I want this to be for podcasters listening at home. I want people to understand that this industry is growing, that I feel like you can't do everything yourself if you really have high ambition, if you really want to take it to the next level. I mean, it's a lot of work. You definitely can do it, but you have to be in definitely a privileged space. So I want to start with your origin story. Tell me how Girth came to be.
Okay. This is the tragic time when my Uncle Ben died.
Yeah, this is it. This is your parents were in an alley. Yeah. You were seeing a Broadway musical. Yeah, things go badly. Yeah.
And then it just went downhill, and my mom's pearls hit the curb. All right, so basically what happened is we are inside the Pacific Junction Hotel Bar, which is here on King and Sherbourne. And the owner of the place, Alex, he recognized a couple of things. One was there's no monopoly on beer nachos in the city. You can get beer nachos anywhere in the city, right? You can go see a Leaf game anywhere. So it made sense to eventually just close off a section of the bar and then build an actual radio station studio where we can bring in podcasters, do radio stuff, all that kind of thing. I met with him in February of 2014, and this was still a booth where people were ordering nachos and hanging out and watching Leaf games. And sure enough, he said, "Let's build this. Let's do this." And I was like, "Let's do it!" We hadn't really thought it through. We didn't do a business plan. We didn't figure anything out. It just seemed like a really good idea. And my background is I've been working. I'd written for the National Post in the entertainment section, so I'd interviewed people like City and Color, Russell Peters, a bunch of people like that. And I also was working with bands in a variety of functions. So I road managed a band. We drove from Toronto to Vancouver. It turned out it's a really big country. Nobody told me. I did video producing, a number of different things like that. So I had a background and I had some network and stuff like this. And I think this is part of like even what Alex was just saying. Like part of it too is just you even what you were just saying, Dan, too. Like you need like a network, at least a bunch of people to do this, right? And so that was one thing. So Alex, the owner here, he didn't have necessarily a network or people that he knew that could like knew bands or knew some PR people, whatever. Of course, because I've been writing for the Post, I had some PR people I could call up for interviews and things like that. So the studio was built by the summer of 2014, and then Alex, he's like, "Here you go." I'm like, "Well, what do I do now?" And then we
we didn't actually we did a plan, but we didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, it seemed like this is a good idea. We'd be dumb not to do this. So we did it, and then it was like, he's like, I don't know, like interview a band or something like that. So that summer of 2014, we brought in some bands, we brought in some friends, people that I knew, and people that I knew would give me grace. And then we just did the figuring it all out, and we pushed bad buttons, like never push that button again. We lost recordings. We made bad recordings.
Been there.
Yeah, right.
It's true, right? Like there's a lot of things that can go wrong when you first start out doing all of this stuff. One of the things why I find both of the models that you both have started so interesting is that our background is a podcast that we went from YouTube, we did a podcast for a bit, and then we ended up back into YouTube again. And one of the things that was really interesting for us was when we went back to YouTube, we went with a multi-channel network, is what they call it on YouTube. And it's the same idea that the Young Turks did, which was for us, it was like a multi-channel network, but they only chose, you could have 1,000 channels, but they chose like 10. And they managed it, and they did a thing where we were allowed to kind of chat with marketing people, and they gave us tips, and they did like, this is how you do thumbnail properly and all of those things. And a lot of those network partners found that useful. And I see the same sort of flood happening in podcasting. There's just so much content that it feels like you do need a network almost now, or that you do need some sort of support, unless you have an amazing niche topic that your podcast is just going to be able to find 1,000 people. But America's way ahead of us in this game with, a few networks, and now I feel we're catching up. Yeah, well, they've always going to be ahead of us in numbers.
But I always looked at it more like you're building an army. Like I looked at it as the movie like 300, where you take a group of people, and thankfully we all wear our shirts, so it's not that bad. But you take a group of people, and then those are the people. Like if you as Alex was saying, for Never Sleeps, right? Like you want to put out good content, you want to put out strong people, and that's your 300, and you go to war with those ones, because you do have to, like, you're facing huge odds, like you're saying, Dan, right? Like there's all kinds of distractions, Netflix, from like you know the whole list. So you go to war, and you try and battle as much as you can to succeed.
I approach my network like you say, like building an army, but my job, even though I started it, I only did that because somebody had to kind of approach. And now, even if you look at my business card, it doesn't say president, doesn't say owner, it says producer. Because that's what I've wanted to be since I got into the industry. It's what I will continue to be. And that's what I do for my network. I'm a producer. I produce my clients, my shows, even sometimes our sponsors. The idea of being able to create content, there's still someone has to be the director of quantity versus quality.
Inspected by number 42.
Okay, yeah.
All right?
Yeah. The idea really is making sure that I exist so you can come to me and say, I have a great idea. And I can go, okay, how do we simplify this part? How do we make this part more accessible? How do we engage people? My general chat with anybody that I work with is, we all know the 10,000 hour rule, right? If you work 10,000 hours at something, you essentially become an expert in it. So say I have somebody who's an expert in comic books and journalism. So like our show Speech Bubble with Aaron Broverman.
So good, by the way.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Never in my life did I ever think I'd be working in comic books, but I'm happy that I am, and Aaron's the best person to be doing with. But, Aaron spent his 10,000 hours being an expert in comic books, being an expert in journalism, from there, he hasn't spent the 10,000 hours being a producer of a podcast, producer of live events, networker, someone to help bounce ideas off. You can't do that by yourself. My 10,000 hours has been spent doing exactly that, being a producer. So I need to find the 10,000 hour experts, whether you're a comedian, whether you're an artist, whether you're a journalist, and I'm going to take your idea and mold it with you until it's, engageable, it's sponsorable, it's a production that everybody can be satisfied with to continue, because we're not doing this, like you said earlier, we were chatting, people burn out in this industry for good reason. How do I extend your life? How do I extend your product? And together, how do we manage? Because without a good manager, talent can't always do what they need to do.
And I think that we want to put this out there to, like, there's 100% if you're a hobbyist or you're somebody who just has a super passionate, niche topic you want to talk about and you want to do that at your home, like, that's amazing, and, you're going to be great at internet creation, and because it's going to be your love and that's what you can do. But there's a lot of people that we can technically make money off of this, or at the very least you can use it to, like, promote a career that you have on the go, right? But at the same time, I really feel like people, they don't have that that wherewithal, that sort of knowledge that you both bring to the table, that we can get really smart and interesting people, we can get their stories out and their lives out much easier through a network model, just because I don't think people realize, unless they've done this for a long time, how much work it is. Because you're really a marketer. You're really a promoter. You're not just a host when you make a show. As soon as you turn that show into a podcast that you want to produce and have people listen to, as soon as you tweet out, you're marketing. Like, so it's that idea that I think that people think this is going to be really easy. I'm going to do it in my bedroom. I'll chat with some people on Skype. And then pretty early on, now, Sam, you've talked about this before. People burn out of this even just when they go into it. They don't realize how much work it's going to be.
Yeah, everyone kind of comes in and thinks, like, I don't know why, but like, I'll set up my podcast and then I'll have like ladies lining up single file and I'll be like rich and famous and I'll like, and they do 2 of them and they're like, that was a lot of work. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know how else to like tell you. And it's like people glaze over that part. They just think they, like, you and I have talked about like Lily Singh, right? Like Superwoman. And it's just like, now it just seems like every time she puts out a video, people are like, it gets like whatever, like 1 million hits or views or whatever. And people are like, oh, that's so easy. That's all I have to do is upload something to YouTube. And then I'm like, that's it? I'm like, all right, good luck with that. So
yeah, this idea, like, when I hear people at like conferences or whatever be like, it's still the wild, wild west. And it's just, anyone can do it from their bedroom. I'm like, you do not know how much work is going into this. It is a skill set, like it always has been, but it's especially a skill set in the digital age to make stuff look or sound easy. And it's not.
And the network, this is where network comes in too, because when you start a podcast in your bedroom, it's like you said, you're just yourself tweeting, right? So it's like, I interviewed this guy, it's really cool, please listen. But when you have a network, then you have 10, 15, 17 different people who are kind of tweeting and bringing traffic in, bringing attention and things like that, which is another advantage that you don't have when you're by yourself. Because getting to the 10,000 hours to get to that level, a lot of times you're very solitary. You're sitting in late night editing, like,
absolutely,
right? You have to
go get
a cable.
That's a huge thing, Sammy. Like, it's a huge thing that YouTubers are all going through right now, and that's why, like, the IWCC, when we do Teal Web Festival, I want to bring every digital creator together, because we all share these similar sort of. It's like, I swear to God, they're going to come up with a mental condition name for it eventually, because there's a solitary confinement breakdown that I've seen happen to so many digital creators, because they're in their room, they're focused on their computer, they're focused on social marketing, they're focused on everything, but they don't meet other people a lot of the time. So, you maybe collab with someone or you bring in your guest that week. But what I noticed even on your network, Alex, is like you'll have a guest do a few shows on the network.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's a huge, like, booking alone. Talk about that.
Well, we're building a family. I mean, I can't do what I do unless it's casual. Everyone's kind of on the same page, enjoying themselves. We want to be able to embrace, new talent that are up and coming in the city, or talent that does get around. How do we get them around on our shows? And that's the best part about my various, shows, is we're trying to extend as many hands as we can to as many different communities as we can. It's almost difficult for me to say my, because it's not my, and I really mean that, as we have a family approach, and again, it's about quality. over quantity. And I bring up that because we have on our website an open form submission for new shows. You know, a lot of students, especially a lot of young people, a lot of people in this day and age are going on Google, going Toronto podcasts, and we pop up. And my phone number is there, and we have a submission form there, and we get at least 5 submissions a week. And I'll reach out to these people personally, and I'll call them up, and I'll say, you know, this is Alex. You know, I'm looking to build our network. You know, and we say 5 shows, but we have an archive of old shows, and we're constantly kind of bringing new shows to the forefront, and kind of in the first time since we started have kind of a base of our shows, which I'm really proud of, and that's what we're bringing to the forefront.
So that 5's your roster right now.
Basically,
so how do I get on? If I'm listening to this show, what's Alex Ross and his family listening for? What when I give a pitch, what's something that you're like, that I'm going to have a conversation about? That sounds like a good Never Sleeps Network show.
You ever talk to somebody and you always are so infatuated with what another person is saying to you, you just want to constantly not only agree with them, but kind of interrupt them to tell them that not only do you agree, but this is why.
Right.
That's what I'm looking for. That is my it factor.
So if somebody comes to you and isn't super passionate and rhyming these things off, you kind of go to sleep?
Well, I never sleep.
Oh, right.
But,
Spoiler alert.
The real truth of it is the amount of work that is needed is what I kind of lay down the law with first. So if somebody's reaching out to it, there's a reason why our roster is only 5. You know, I like that as a number because I can do something Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, essentially, and then repost stuff on the weekend. But if I'm ever looking to add something new into the mix, because some of our shows air once a week, some of them air once every 2 weeks, so there's always room for new and exciting stuff to pop in and out, whether it's, you know, you guys promoting us and we're reposting it. There's always kind of opportunities for us to collaborate too, and we're big on that too. This is not about us, not just about us, I should say. It's about how do we connect to all these various communities and therefore bring them onto our various shows. But ultimately, when I'm talking to somebody new in my life that I'm picking out of these submissions that I get, I lay down the law right away and say, this is how much work it takes. This is how much money you're not going to make at first.
Yes.
This is the potential of how much work it takes to actually get to this point of involvement, engagement, and understanding from sponsors, from your peers.
It's one of the things I think is really interesting too about just this medium is it's conversational. And a lot of people, like young people, will come up at IWCC and they'll say, I want to start a podcast. And I'll sit them down and I'm like, you want to host your podcast? Yeah. So I just talk to them. And sometimes they can't have an actual conversation. And you go, you have to listen to who your favorite podcasters are. Like the skill set they had going in, they might not have been able to do it as well at the beginning. I'm sure everybody builds their craft. But a lot of people don't understand that conversation's kind of key. If you're good at this in real life, it's helpful.
Yes.
It's an easier skill set to segue into a podcast. What do you look for at Girth, Sammy? Like, what is the thing what's the je ne sais quoi that goes, okay, I'm interested?
Yeah, I find that building the network, one of the things people always worry about is the technical aspects. And, like, they do the opposite of what you're saying, Dan, which is, like, they think that they're good at conversations, they're good at communicating, so it's just they got to figure out how to do the mics and how to set everything up, the gear, the technical. So that was one of the first challenges we had setting everything up, was just making sure everything was as simple as possible. Right, and we've kind of boiled it down because you can get really complex and stuff in terms of like setting it all up, getting levels, all that jazz. But after that, then the key is just the knowledge and the enthusiasm you have for a particular topic. Like we kind of like, because we're in a bar, I like the whole idea of just kind of like those bar conversations, right? So when you get together with your friends in a bar, you have arguments about movies or you have arguments about music or whatever. And if that's the kind of like, you got to be able to present your perspective. You gotta take their perspective, see it, spin it, throw it back to them, that whole thing. And that's best kind of bar conversations that you have. And when you go out with your friends and you have a bunch of drinks and you leave, you're like, man, that was a good night. And you didn't actually really do anything. You didn't do any road tripping or whatever, but just you had a good night and you connected. That's what I'm looking for. And so if you can kind of share either stories from that world that you're in. We have some girls who are like nurses, for example, and so they tell some stories. One of them was telling a story of how I think she was in Cuba. It was anyways some all-inclusive, and she was going through medical school at the time and still in nursing and whatever, so she hadn't graduated yet, and somebody was having a heart attack, whatever. So she had some knowledge, medical knowledge, but not enough to feel comfortable to help that dude yet. but she's going into professional. She has to help a dude. So she went through the ethical kind of process to kind of break that down. And so it's like, that's something like I would have never like thought about or heard about or whatever if I hadn't met you. And it's a good bar conversation because now it's like, all right, let's get some drinks and let's chill and let's talk about this and see where this goes.
You know, the 10,000 hours, whether you like believe in that set number or not, but I think it's a really good metric in terms of if you are somebody who knows at least enough or has lived that life. Like, I think that one thing that people forget about in the digital age a lot, I don't know if you guys will agree with me, but there's this sort of idea that, oh, I want to be Kevin Smith, I want to be Mark Maron, I want to, insert, Amanda Palmer, whoever their, like, digital hero is that raised a lot of money on Kickstarter, has their own network. But they've lived an entire life of, like, in the old system. So I hate when I see, like, reports or, like, stories about digital creation, and they always use those folks. They didn't build it online. They built it in the old system, and it was easy to carry over to digital because they'd already built their audience. Now, they had to build an entirely new digital audience, and the people that are good at that have clearly risen right above the rest. But the
foundation actually came from a terrestrial platform as opposed to a digital platform.
Right.
You're right.
And so if you're not Kevin Smith, you're not Amanda Palmer, you're not Mark Maron, you're not insert names. You have to be good at this. Like, you have to be engaging. Otherwise, no one's listening to you because they don't know who you are.
Yeah, why listen to you?
Why you of the thousands of podcasts? So let me ask you both, when you're looking at these shows, when you're thinking about making something, what's the most common mistake people make coming into you? When somebody says, I got this idea, or they start their podcast off, what do you find the learning curve is?
Being able to talk confidently about something that, in some personal circles, you may not be that confident, depending on stigma or always concerning yourself with what other people think. I think my greatest success tip is to stop giving a fuck about what other people think.
It's so
100%.
freeing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've lost that ability to care about the things that don't matter. And when you really put into perspective, and it's easy to say for someone who does it, and I understand the trials and tribulations of people who are working on that. And listen, you need to reach out to somebody who is happy to give you a pep talk and motivate you to do what you're doing. That's what I do for a living. The reason I have even my own podcast is to show the rest of my clientele, if I can do it, you can do it. And I'll show you how. My ultimate goal is to not do my own podcast, is to create more and more podcasts and produce them and give my expertise and my experience to help other talent grow. I only do it, monkey see, monkey do. If I can approach this with the way I want to approach it and get minor success, and you're better at me at your 10,000-hour experience, let's combine our experience and make something even bigger.
We're going to talk a little bit about how these networks can work together. I also want to talk to both of you about things you shouldn't do in podcasting. But first, it's time for some shout-outs. So every week on Creatortown, we do some shout-outs. We ask you on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, what should we be watching and listening to? Plus, we throw in our own picks to keep it interesting. Vince, because this week's all about the podcast, I'm going to start off with the two other podcasts that aren't from Never Sleeps Networks that are selected for TIA Webfest this year.
Cool.
The first, Sheko Sheko. They call it a new form of Somali entertainment. It's a fantastic panel of 20-somethings that discuss the topics of the day. They have 1 million views on YouTube. They're closing in on the magic 10,000 subscriber number. So be sure to give them a sub on YouTube, Facebook follow, or just take a listen on SoundCloud. It's a really cool show called Sheko Sheko. You should check it out.
Well, my next shout-out goes to Muses and Stuff. It's a podcast all about the dolls, the groupies, and muses of rock and roll's greatest bands and songs. So a big shout-out goes to Shanti and Lynx doing their thing, and thank you so much for actually mentioning TIA Webfest.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
They did that in their mini-sode.
That's right. So right back at you.
Shout out back to you. It's just a giant circle love in here. It's very Woodstock. If you ask, you shall receive, children. And this week's token American shout-out goes to Brooklyn, New York, because of course it does. It's Brooklyn, New York. It's the web series Brains. It's a series about love, friendship, neuropsychology, and zombies, naturally. It follows 23-year-old Allison Sumner, who is a neuropsychology student, getting back into vlogging now that the apocalypse is finally dying down. So if you're living in America in 2016, I'm sure you can relate to this. The first 2 seasons are available, so check it out, brainswebseries.com. Vince, what's on your YouTube radar?
My YouTube shout-out goes to John Morris, living the Maritimes lifestyle on his vlog, Fun with John. It's an adventure and travel vlog that goes over the east coast of Canada, from trampoline wipeouts to hanging out with Justin Trudeau. It's a vlog worth watching.
Justin Trudeau gets around this damn country. He's even on vlogs now.
Man, everywhere.
He's so good at selfies, he's showing up on YouTube with random maritime vloggers.
He wants to show his face and
everything
else.
I dig it.
So, Fun with John on YouTube. Check it out.
Hey, Creatortown at gmail.com if you want a shout out or just get in touch with us over social. Every week we're shouting these things out, and don't fret, we YouTube playlist this all for those on YouTube, and we also link them all in the description below. So once again, wherever you find this podcast, there's a link. Follow it for the digital liner notes. Kids, before we get Sammy and Alex's shout outs this week, I want to do the Creatortown cover. So this week's Creatortown cover is by Anna Klein. She's a singer-songwriter in Saskatchewan who's just released her new EP, Innocence. You should all check it out. Meanwhile, over on our YouTube channel, she puts her own spin on Harry Styles' latest. So for the kids at home, new solo stuff, check out this cover. Be sure to dive into that. But for this spotlight, we've chosen a little bit an older creator. Not so Harry Styles, but someone just a few years older. It's YouTube's favorite songstress, Lana Del Rey. So sit back, relax, and listen to Anna Klein's cover of Lana Del Rey's Love here on Creatortown.
That's what I'm talking about.
Look at you kids with your vintage music, coming through satellites while cruising. You're part of the past, but now you're the future. Signals crossing can get confusing. It's enough just to make you feel crazy, crazy, crazy. Sometimes it's enough just to make you feel crazy. You get ready, you get all dressed up to go nowhere in particular. Back to work or the coffee shop. It doesn't matter, it's enough to be out
That was Anna Klein on this week's Creatortown cover, doing a masterful job on Lana Del Rey's single Love. You can find that cover on Anna's YouTube page, and you can also watch Anna's covers on Instagram at Anna Klein Music. Like we always say, give the original some love. That new EP, Innocence, is craving to be heard on iTunes, Spotify, and the good old Google Play. So remember, kids, all of these week's shout-outs, videos, they can be found on the website. So if you're watching this on YouTube, check the cards for the guest pages. If you're listening to this on Girth Radio, check the link in the description. Gentlemen, start your throws. I want to hear about who, my friends, should we be paying attention to this week? Sammy, start us off here.
I'm going to nerd it up and go with the boys at Geek Hard, Andrew and James, lovely chaps. And so they host on Friday nights a Geek Hard live radio show. You can tune into that for Reality 101 Radio. And then they, with Andrew, I co-host a kind of a no-holds-barred comic book nerd-off called Back Issue Bloodbath. And we just get into comics. We kind of have 3 or 4 different topics. We kind of do old-timey comic, a new-timey comic, a creator, and sometimes like a subject, like a fun thing. Like this, one of the ones we're recording coming up is like the best kind of comic book store experiences. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Into that. Into it. Alex, hit me with who you're shouting out, and you can shout out one of your own network shows as well here.
Well, I mean, as far as outside of the Never Sleeps Network family, my favorite Toronto-based podcast is Chris Locke's Utopia to Me, which I mentioned on the IWCC article.
You did, yeah. You said you really liked that. Yeah.
I'm obsessed with Chris Locke, and I think he knows it, so sorry, Chris.
The restraining order is coming, don't worry.
Yeah, eventually, I'm sure. His approach to podcasting and his approach to comedy, his approach to life is kind of what I wish I was able to do, and I think he'll be the first person to be completely modest, and he's like, why praise me? And that's exactly why I'm praising him, because his nonchalant approach, the guests, the likability of him as a person, as a entity in Toronto-based comedy, Canada-based comedy, and his approach to his show, it's literally having his friends, fellow artists, talk about what their utopia is. And that's such an interesting subject matter because it's consistent. Every episode is about the same thing, but everybody's utopia is so different. And the way he just kind of digs into the comedy and the comedic value out of someone's utopia, and the way he breaks it down, I just wish I had that ability as a producer, as a podcaster myself. And he doesn't get the praise he deserves. That show should have a sponsor. He should be doing this full time. And Chris Locke, keep doing what you're doing, and please don't mind that I'm always shamelessly promoting you.
It's a good subtle slow pitch into like, come to the Never Sleeps Network.
Yeah,
Chris.
I don't want.
That's
That's the thing too. It's so hard for me to be a fan.
Everyone thinks you've got a side hustle,
yeah, right? Because listen, you have to be a hustler in this industry, and I'm sure Sam will agree, and I'm sure you guys will agree.
Yeah.
If
100%.
If you're not hustling, you're not working hard enough.
No.
You have to have as many hands, as many honeypots as possible. But the root of why I do what I do is because I love it. And it's reasons that Chris Locke's podcast makes me love what I do, because I wish I could make the stars align like he is able to, which he's not even doing on purpose. It's this weird thing that I go through in my head every day. How come I'm not doing more, or I'm not doing not enough to make things happen naturally? It's kind of this constant battle. And I equate it to one of the biggest podcasts in, I would say, the world right now, which is Bill Burr's Monday podcast and Thursday podcast, where it's literally just Bill, even though Bill doesn't have any guests like Chris does, but his approach, this ability to just throw on the record switch, be exactly who you are at all times, not an act. You're passionate, you're interesting, you're funny. There's all these things that I wish I could just do.
Surly, too. Don't forget the surly.
Surly,
yeah.
It's
Billy Redface.
Yeah. The authenticity factor, though, of all digital creation, I feel, is the number one thing that people, I think it gets thrown out like a cliche, but it's just so true. It really is. Like, if you're not authentic in this space, you just won't make it.
It's the best
Everybody
way of putting
can
it.
smell the BS in this era, yeah.
The metrics are the quicksand, right? Because people want to do whatever they think needs to get some sort of traffic, some sort of go viral, or whatever they're cheesy. I mean, you were asking before about success and things then, right?
Yeah.
like if you are trying to book certain guests or you're trying to do certain things because you think it'll be successful or that's because the internet will like it or using the internet as a focus group or whatever, Twitter will eat this up. Like that's always going to backfire. It's not going to have that authenticity ring, and people will start to see through that.
There's also a ceiling for that kind of content that I think people in the early days of digital creation, I mean, let's be honest, we're really a decade into all of this in a lot of ways. It's just that factor that people see it as the brass ring, but they get it, and then everybody surpasses them eventually, and their brass ring slowly sinks them, because what's hip tomorrow isn't a career-building thing you're doing. It's just an analytics build that you're doing.
You're
the
down.
Difference between, you're digging down is a great way to put it. It's the analytics versus the 5-year plan. And the very first podcast we ever did for you, Megan McKay is a really huge YouTuber. She had a hit with this like makeup tutorial satire, and she's like, if I kept doing that, I would have got more money. I would have had more views. But I would have been that person forever. I would have just been like, the sitcom neighbor, and she didn't want to do it.
And there's no growth beyond that
right.
certain point.
You hit a ceiling. And I think that's what people forget about in digital creation, is to be themselves and to keep doing things authentically.
Metrics aside, authenticity is the only thing that will stay consistent.
Right.
And if you're not that same person from the first sign or from the introduction of your work to your completion or to your success, then I don't want to work with you.
No.
You're not the same person. That means your consistency is going to change or your ego is going to get in the way. And we all have egos. I want to work with egos, but there has to be an authenticity to it. And I wish I could bottle that, because we're all hustlers, and there's something that's not necessarily completely authentic to being a hustler. You kind of have to wear many hats, shake a lot of hands, and I'm all about trying to be as authentic as possible and work with authentic people as possible, because ultimately, I always say, ego is one thing, but if you're going to go to the top and be successful and have an ego, it's going to be a lonely rise to the top. So I want to bring as many authentic people to the top with everybody else who deserves to be there, and everybody enjoy each other's company, because the second that you're not authentic and the ego gets in the way, it affects your work.
I want to add to that, because one of the things with authenticity that most people don't talk about is the element of surprise. When you are authentic and you're not worried about metrics or not caring or whatever, and you're kind of just putting the work in and you're following whatever muse you have, it opens up some really interesting doors. So one of the earlier interviews I did here at Girth Radio, I interviewed some magicians. There was a documentary at Hot Docs, and I like magic, so I invited the magicians over, and I'm like, yo, let's talk about magic. It's not, most people are not going to listen to a podcast I'm looking for a podcast about magicians, right? Most people want to hear like music podcasts or comic book podcasts and these kind of things. I interviewed the magicians, and it was great. We had a lot of fun. We were talking about magic, and like they made quarters disappear, all the whole bit. They were like, they're based in LA, and they're like, Sammy, anytime you're in LA, let us know, and we can get you into the Magic Castle. I've been trying to get into the Magic Castle. It's a dream of mine since
That's awesome.
Since high school. And so I was like, I'm coming to LA, and they're like, anytime you're coming, and like, because sometimes people just offer you that thing, like if you ever are in the neighborhood in New York City or LA, whatever. And I'm like, no, I'm actually coming. I'm coming in June. So my friend Jerome, who's also been pining for the Magic Castle since like high school, he and I went. We went in June, and the magicians got us into the Magic Castle.
Wow.
And we got to. It's actually, this is a tangent, but it's worth this tangent. So, for people that don't know, you can't just like you have to know a magician to get into the Magic Castle. It's out in the West Hollywood Hills, and you have to be on the guest list.
Magic Castle for, I don't know if anyone watches the Netflix series Love, where he takes her on a date. Did anyone see that? Okay. That's the right place. From a non-magic for all the non-magic nerds out there.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And so you have to be on the guest list too. So one of the magicians, John, he put us on the guest list. I'm really grateful. Thank you, John. And you go into this small room, and it's this giant castle. It looks like Casa Loma and whatever outside. But it's this really small entrance. You're like, well, how do you get into the castle? So the lady checks your name, and she's like, all right, you guys, I'm like Sammy and Jerome. She's like, yep, you guys are on the list. She goes, so just go over to that wall over there. It was a wall. It's like a bookcase, just books everywhere, and just looks like a normal library wall. And she's like, go say the magic words. I'm like, whoa, what's the magic words? And she's like, open sesame. And so you go up to the wall, and you say, open sesame. And like in the movies, that bookcase just slides back, and then you enter into the Magic Castle.
Nice.
And I was like, I'm done already, man.
That is
I don't
cool.
need anything else. Like, I
And
just
I turned around and walked out.
I just got back on the plane, and I'm like, I'm out. I just saw a bookcase go back. I'm like, yo.
Google in downtown Toronto, their headquarters, not YouTube Space TO, but Google Canada, they actually have that same bookcase deal that opens up like a secret, like kind of like a restroom for employees if they just want to chill. And Google's really big on that. When you first go in, they're like, oh yeah, you think you're cool? And then they just show you all of these things, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, Google Canada, you're so awesome.
Back to our point about metrics, though. Are metrics considered the same way they were 10 years ago? I mean, there's so many different varieties of metrics now, and there's so many different ways to engage.
I feel like loyalty, which isn't a metric, but you can judge by when somebody puts something out into the ether and how fast people respond to it and with passion. Like, you see that in the web series world with something called Carmilla, which is a Canadian show on Kinda TV on YouTube. They have built a genuine audience, whereas there's other shows and, podcasts in the same boat, right? You see somebody, like, throw something out on YouTube, or you throw something up on Twitter or Instagram, and there's not the engagement. You might get the likes, but I really think the metrics game now is I think that marketers are slowly catching on, but I think creators are figuring out, too, that a lot of it's BS. The sad thing about Canada, though, that I have a real problem with, speaking from the IWCC standpoint, is that the funders haven't figured out those things yet. Like, they're not sniffing out the fakes well.
It's a popularity contest, and I'm not saying like in a high school way, and I agree that popularity is a great way to base success in a metrics kind of way. But you as a consumer know, especially in a city like Toronto where you see all these different creators at the forefront, whether it's social media or even just, live events or even just, browsing YouTube or like I said, a lot of our fans come because they just wrote Toronto podcasts and, we pop up. But metrics and loyalty kind of shines through on the loyalty side. My point is, you kind of see something as a fan, as a supporter, even someone just floating around on social media. Where is this post coming from? Why? What is their intention? Why am I interested? Is it coming from a good place? Is it coming from a place that I understand? We are so much more aware, and we know when the bullshit is apparent. But another example, we were talking about shout-outs, Comedy Above the Pub. Todd Van Allen.
Yeah, like the Podfather almost.
I would call him the Podfather.
He's the old school. He's Mark Maron before Mark Maron.
I called him that. I said that. I was like, you're the Canadian Mark Maron. You've been doing it the longest. You've built this kind of brand loyalty just because people know that you've been consistent. You've kept it up. You're the nicest guy ever. You're talented. All these things come cumulatively, and you can't help but support it because it's authentic.
Yeah.
And I give a big shout out to Todd because we need more success being thrown at places like Todd Van Allen, at Chris Locke, and I would love if we were even seen, in a similar light. I'm working towards that.
But
they motivate me.
That's the thing. The way people find you, you kind of touched upon that. Where like I got to name drop for 1 second, so I apologize. But like I interviewed Sam Roberts, right? And so a lot of people won't know.
That's the most CanCon name drop by the way ever.
Love Sam Roberts and Hayden.
I got a name drop right now. Biff Naked.
Yes.
Anyway, sorry.
I once met the bare naked ladies.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about authenticity too, though, right? So I'll name drop other ones.
Keep it real. Keep it real.
So I'll do the CanCon name drop. But when I interviewed Sam Roberts, a lot of people may not necessarily know who I am or care about me or whatever, but there will be Sam Roberts fans, and they will find those interviews and things like that. You know what I mean?
I love that, Sam. Great explanation.
Right? So they will come based on the guest, too, sometimes. It's not always because I'm, like, a really good podcaster or interviewer or, like, cool dude that's happening or whatever. It's like, who is this dude? It doesn't matter. It's like Sam Roberts. They want to consume it. He was great. He talked about this stuff. I'm done. And then they go on their way. I think it's just that's where the loyalty then eventually has to come back.
You talk about people in this country who have done interviews well, right, and have built careers off it. So you talk about Strombo. Let's just use him. Whether you like him, you hate him, whether you think he's the greatest Canadian that ever lived, or whether you're sick of him because his face is everywhere, it doesn't matter. What is really important with Strombo is there was a hustle there that got. And when I say hustle, I don't mean it in a negative way. I mean like hard worker. Yeah. When you do that hard work and you get those guests, there's also that you have to ask the right questions. People can tell the difference, especially when you do a podcast. Have I ever listened to a Never Sleeps podcast?
Yeah,
Have I ever listened to Girth Radio? When
Mm-hmm.
you sit down as a host, to give hosts out there some advice, I think, because every one of us has done it around this table, you do have to research your guests. Like, you have to know something. You want to do a deep dive, find out something interesting. And there's nothing better for me listening to a podcast. Nardwar, old school, right?
You
Right.
pulled that from my frickin' brain.
He's like great at
He's the
giving
best. Yes,
people
he's the best.
things that they love, and they're surprised. And when you hear that surprise, when you hear that love in their voice, being like, "Oh my god, how did you
That's-
know this?"
That's an important thing what you're talking about, which is dig deep inside too when you're researching somebody as a guest.
So
too.
I
that-
call it the reduction because
Right.
you'll see that when people die, when Prince died or Bowie died, like they reduced this person just to this one thing. Prince was a really good guitarist or something really simple, and I'm like,
He wore purple a lot.
he wore purple a lot. And everybody is, once you get to a certain level, with
Yeah.
especially with certain guests, you have this reduction where people just, they can only handle, like the general public can only handle them. Like Kevin Smith is a filmmaker. End of story. I'm like, no, there's a lot more going on than that.
And both of you, I think, can maybe relate to this, which is the point of podcasting. I would argue the why it's better and why it's almost taken over, where Jimmy Fallon has to do almost a variety show now, is that you can get into deeper conversations. So when I listen to a podcast, I probably don't want to hear the CBC radio interview, like where you just
boxes
give
of
me
briefs?
Yeah, no, not even that. I was actually going to say, like, if I'm interviewing you guys, I want your thoughts on the industry, and I want your thoughts on stuff that like a regular interviewer is not going to ask you, because our show is a digital creator podcast. If you're hosting a show and you're interviewing a musician and you're interviewing Sam Roberts, I don't want to hear about the hits. I want to hear about, like, what was this specific tour like or something, because if I'm a fan of that band and I listen to your show, Sammy, I might be like, I'm gonna bookmark this podcast because this guy doesn't just do like I heard you had a hit with Brother Down, tell me about Brother Down. You know what I mean? It's
Like-
that, and the band's turn off too, right?
Right.
Your
So,
guest
like
gets
with Sam
bored.
Roberts, one of the first questions I asked him. This again goes back to what I was saying about the reduction. Like, he's done interviews with Strombo, Billboard magazine, Gameshi when he was on Q. Like, he's done a variety of those kind of interviews. Like, he's been around, right? So when he came in, I said to him, "Look, your new album's called Terraform. You have another one called Collider. You have like a song called Shapeshifters. You have all these like nerd references." And he cuts me off, and he's like, "Sammy, are you trying to ask me if I'm a nerd?" I'm like, "I don't want to accuse you, but yeah, are you a nerd?" And he starts laughing. He goes, "Yeah, I love this stuff." And he starts talking about
You have a pivot point, then all of a sudden,
Right,
You can do
and then
something
Pivot
neat.
point.
Yeah,
right? And this
Yeah.
goes back to
100%.
authenticity, though. I know this stuff. So we started talking about Lord of the Rings and Chronicles of Narnia and all the stuff he grew up in, and he likes X-Men comics.
And that comes back to you're at a bar talking to a friend,
Right.
And I think that's sort of like, it's overstated, but it really is. Like when you were talking about Chris Locke, right? Chris Locke going down a rabbit hole with somebody about utopia is way more interesting than if I asked somebody like, "So what's doing an open mic night like?"
Yeah.
Because you might not have ever heard those two guys before. You might not have ever heard them. You might not even know their stand-up, but you'll get caught up in the conversation because it's just interesting. And I think that people lose out on that sometimes by, if you don't talk to people about what they're passionate about, or you don't try to open up the conversation at some point, and you just have a list of questions. You know, if you that first podcaster start that we all have, I mean, we all start somewhere, but I think that's the key to it, is trying to lead people to deeper conversation.
let social media do the work too, because usually when a guest comes, they've already promoted, like when their viral video is out, or when their next YouTube video is out, or when the new album's out, or whatever. You don't have some of the work is already done for you, so you can then just, because that work is already done, that marketing's already done, then you can get into those issues. The audience can figure out when the album's coming out or whatever. You don't need to be there to promote it that way.
I love just saying, plug your socials. Like, don't.
Yeah.
You know, I don't. This
There you go.
interview might not come out in time for your next gig. Where do we see your upcoming gigs? You know, keep it simple, and then you don't have to worry about, oh no, this is going to come out. I got to make sure it works out for these dates and stuff. But to just reiterate what you guys are saying, I call it selfish giving. A good conversation. A good conversation is, I want it to be about me, but I want you to talk about things that are going to interest me. I started my own podcast as kind of a flagship show for Never Sleeps Network, to show that if I can do it, pretty much anybody can do it. But then I realized I have the ability to look up my favorite people in the city that I would never have an opportunity to have a conversation with, reach out to them on social media, because Toronto's such a large, small city. I have this ability to, build a brand, get a few good guests on, prove that I'm worthy of asking them the right questions, and then build from there. And then now I'm not afraid to message. You know, I've had some pretty interesting people on my show that would never just talk to me for an hour or two. And then when I have them, the selfish giving part comes into play here. When I have them sitting in front of me and I make them comfortable, where we've had a few laughs, then I ask the questions that, you know, they've never been asked before. Or because it's a podcasting internet Wild West, if you will, let's talk about things that you would never be able to say in a corporation.
Yeah, and I think that when you send that introductory email, if you're a podcaster out there, like, it's really important to include a couple of those hints in your email, like that you really did your work on this. Like, you just don't want to ask. If you want a famous person to come to your house and sit down and talk to you,
I know the feeling.
They might do it, right? But you have to include that email. I want to talk about, I just saw you tweet about blank. So, like, I'll give you a really good example. Like, early on, we got people on our show about their activism. So they were, like, being artists that they didn't want to talk about their music. They had, like, a pet cause. Like, Bullfrog Power was Gord Downey's at one point. And, like, and the point is, if you say to them, like, I want to chat with you why you're so passionate about that, it'll come back around to music. You'll get your, like, you know, I want to talk about Blow It High Dough. Like, you know what I mean? But it's that, if you can get them where they're interested and where you can actually show that you're interested in what they have to say, I mean, I think that's a more interesting for the artist. And we're talking about, you know, big names, but this is sort of true for no matter who you interview. It's really more interesting to listen to two people talk about what they're passionate about as the two people plugging whatever, as you just said, two people plugging whatever they have to plug, right?
And everybody wants an opportunity to plug. So if you're offering an opportunity to plug, most people will say yes if you present it properly. But you can tell the difference between a good interview and a bad interview. And it's not just research. It's your approach. It's how much you're engaging them, why you're engaging them. And instantly you can tell from the responses you're getting, or when you listen to a podcast and you hear someone being interviewed, when they get thrown for a loop, or even the host doesn't really understand what they're saying. You know, you kind of have to really break down, why is this person even here?
Yeah.
They're good, like good first dates, especially when there's somebody you're just meeting for the first time to interview them. It's like a good first date. If you can kind of make them laugh a little bit, maybe giggle, do the thing with their hair, then the chances are they want to come back, right? And they have that kind of conversation, that spark. They want to come back. But I think all of us have been to, like, film festivals or comic book conventions and things like that, and you see the questions that people ask, right, at those type of events. And there's inevitably the audience cringe because somebody asked something super awkward or something super, like, that's not appropriate, or that's super dumb, or, like, can you read my script, or, like, one of those kind of things, right? Like, it's not the right place, it's not the right forum.
Did you bring up the first date thing because Backstreet Boys are blaring in the
Yes.
background?
Yeah, well, that's it, too, yeah.
Can we afford this song in this
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
The CanCon, everybody needs to put 5 cents into the tray before you leave here so we can send Universal.
5 cents for each Backstreet
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah.
That's the royalty payment. That's it.
AJ gets 10 cents.
Yeah. Is he the older one or I don't know the backstory.
That's next time.
Okay.
Gentlemen, I hope you both come back so we can do part 2 of this podcast, because there's still a whole lot of things that I want to get into with both of you. But until then, as Alex would say, social plug us, guys. Tell us what we should be listening to on both your networks, and tell us where we can find you.
Well, every day on Never Sleeps Network, we're usually posting something on our Instagram at Never Sleeps Network. NeverSleepsNetwork.com has definitely a large roster of shows that we've archived throughout the years we've been working, but our main roster currently involves Nick Beaton, and this incredible comedian, brilliant. You can call him a political satirist or a conservative. You can call him so many different things, but what he is amazing. And Nick Beaton has a show called This Is Not a Safe Space. We have another show with another great comedian called Jeff Paul, who does the largest during the week comedy show in the city at the Underground, 670 Queen Street East, called The Dope and Mike. His show is The Potato Files, because he's known as the Human Potato. And it's definitely, you know, comedians talking to comedians and other artists, but the questions that Jeff asks, like you said, we want to hear the questions that nobody's asking, and Jeff really has no holds barred when it comes to his approach. He's talking about, you know, when did you lose your virginity? You know, when did your parents conceive you? You know, like,
I listened to his episode on Hunter Collins, with Hunter Collins.
Yeah.
And Hunter talked about his, like, family and his divorced dad and stuff. And I knew Hunter back from Comedy College, and he came on Truth Mashup.
Yeah.
And when we did a TV series, and it was a really good show because I
Yeah.
was like, I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Like, it was really interesting. He's
Honestly,
great.
yeah, we don't like the idea of him interviewing comedian after comedian, but these are his friends, and he's getting the best stories out of them that you'll never hear these stories on any other comedian's podcast.
No.
Speech Bubble with Aaron Broverman is Toronto's best podcast with comic books.
I second that.
Thanks.
Yeah, Aaron's awesome.
Aaron, he just did live interviews at Harry Tarantula, which is their sponsor. Harry Tarantula is one of the most prominent comic book stores in the city. He just did a live interview with Jay Torres and Chip Zdarsky, who is from Sex Criminals, Kaptara,
Jughead.
Howard the Duck, Jughead. And these are Toronto-based. You'd be surprised to hear that Toronto is the mecca for artists that are currently working for Marvel, DC, and the independent scene, which is massive in Toronto. We have the amazing Phil Luzzi doing a video series with us called Philin' the, and that can be seen on our YouTube page at Never Sleeps Network. We're on Twitter, Never Sleeps Net. I have a show, Ross Never Sleeps. I've been doing it, I've been involved in radio and broadcast since high school. All the way back to Westmount Radio 1 in Thornhill, Ontario. Ross Never Sleeps is my alias. It's my homage to everything, off the cuff and off the live recording floor like this, kind of via Neil Young. And it's my opportunity to, like I said, talk to my favorite artists and entrepreneurs in Toronto. Really just talk about the industry that they're involved in and what they're doing differently than everybody else in Toronto.
Phil's got to come out to TO Webfest. We'll talk.
Yeah, I'd love to get Phil to come around and do some live video coverage for you guys.
That'd be amazing. Sammy,
Yes, sir.
hit us up with some of our Girth fam here.
All right, we got Sean, who has Creative Imbalance, and he gets some of the coolest and wackiest weirdos, I guess, for lack of a better.
And Sean does the same approach, which I think there's a theme in this show that it's like coming at people from different angles. Sean does a good job of like talking about the creative process. Like, why are you passionate about this? He's like a shrink angle on it.
He is a shrink angle, but it's also people that are kind of like beatboxing, pornography. It's like different kind of creative. It's not normally it's not a normal arts and crafts, I guess, is what you would normally.
I like the idea of combining those two things, beatboxing and pornography.
Yeah, so yeah, it's,
That's a totally terrible throw for Sean's show. Everyone's gonna be like, I want to get that. Where's that beatbox pornography episode?
I'm just gonna let it go.
Sorry,
I'm not even
Sean.
gonna correct it. Yeah, just like
We'll see if he notices on social.
Yes.
We'll see if his analytics spike tomorrow.
Yeah, so-
I mean, he might have a new idea for a whole new show now.
That's
Yeah.
true.
We just gave you one. There you go. You're welcome, Internet.
gold, man. I feel like a miner. I just discovered gold. So, and then the other one we have is Kareem, who has a show called Welcome. And he's got a variety of kind of guests. Some of it is like kind of political. He had he interviewed a woman who had a son, who's a young son, and he's on the no-fly list. But it's just because his name is this very similar name to somebody else on the no-fly list. So, and he kind of does a whole range of things. Like Dan, I think you've listened to a couple.
Yeah,
of
I mean, he's listening. He has had everybody on the show from people like Steve Paikin straight
right,
on
yeah.
through to like there was a great baseball. If you're a Jays fan,
Yeah.
check out one of his recent
Recent
episodes where they
episode,
did
yeah.
like a good hour on what the upcoming Blue Jay series is going to be like. So if you're into like any, if you're into any sort of Toronto especially centric stuff, he's a really great podcast to listen to.
And we do also, because we are we also have DJs as well. So we have people like spinning and things like that. So every Wednesday night we have some house DJs. So we have they're called the Secret Society, and that's just just a 2-3 hour playlist. And so what we do is because we're in a bar as well, we bring people in from about 6 to 9, and then they just kind of spin some really nice kind of chill house music. People kind of groove a little bit, have some tacos. And so we can kind of do a mashup of that, kind of like half music, half playlist, and then half talk. And I host 2 shows. I guess I may as well do this shameless plug as well. So
It's not shameless here.
All right.
The whole show's been shameless.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah,
We should
all
just
right.
call
You're
this
in
show
good company.
Shameless Plugs
Yeah.
with Dan and Vince.
Yeah. The hustler, I guess, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's a hustle.
Oh, yeah.
It's your side hustle. So plug them, baby, plug them.
So one is My Summer Lair. This is the one I said where I interviewed magicians. We can kind of
Not, by the way, every week.
Yeah.
No,
Don't
every
let
week.
people down.
Yeah. Okay, well, why don't we just keep going with the way we did with Sean's, like they're beatboxing magicians then.
Yes.
And then...
Who do pornography.
Yeah.
Sold.
So that's it. Like, again, gold. And so that's kind of like a pop culture celebration. So I interview filmmakers, writers, comic book people, any sort of like nerd kind of culture like that. And then the other one is just in session with Girth Radio, and that's the one where I mentioned where like Sam Roberts and stuff like that. So we've had like Sam Roberts, 5440, a lot of CanCon stuff like that.
If I'm a musician in this city, Sammy, how do I get on that show?
Email me, sammy@girthradio.com.
So we don't have a divorce in the family. We got to get out of this booth because there's a show up next. So I got to end it there. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge with everybody. Thank you for chatting with us. We will check out those beatboxing pornographer magicians next time, and we'll chat about that when you come back.
That was alone was worth it just to do this.
Yeah,
like,
just
to get that
alone.
out into
Yeah.
the city now.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. That's
Thank you.
Creatortown for this week. We want to thank all the members of the IWCC for making this show possible. $5 a month makes awesome things happen, so big thanks to everyone who gives to us. Also, big thanks to our musical guest, Anna Klein in Saskatchewan, for sharing love with us. Check out her new EP, Innocence, and of course, our in-studio friends once again, Alex Ross of Never Sleeps Network, Sammy Younan from Girth Radio. Check out the Pacific Junction Hotel if you're in Toronto too. Drop by and have a drink with us. We record this show on Tuesday nights, so feel free to swing by. You can sit in the corner and do social media if you want. I told you I would say it just before we got out of here. You got one plug. One plug. You're welcome.
Thank you to our content editor, Trish Muldoon.
There you go. See, there's the real. That's a legit plug now. We'll put your picture in the liner notes, winking at us. Yeah. Every week you can find us here on Girth Radio. Make sure you click that link in the description for the digital liner notes and all the shoutouts in the episode, so you can binge all of that content. Don't forget you can sign up for our newsletter for all the things too: creator spotlights, events, TO Webfest, all that jazz. You know where it is. I'm Dan Speerin for Vince Kesavamoorthy and all your friends at Girth Radio. Farewell for now, but let's continue our conversation next week. Good night, everybody.